After 17 years, that was the reason he gave me. You are making too much money. I remember the exact tone in his voice. Flat, rehearsed, like he had practiced it. I had heard similar justifications before, murmured behind closed doors, but never delivered to my face. Not like this. My name is Ron Keller. I spent nearly 2 decades at the same firm. I was not a lifer by accident. I stayed because I believed in what we built. I did not think about the years as they passed. I thought about the progress, about the projects we brought from blueprint to reality, about the way our clients trusted us with every new expansion. I thought about my team, the culture we created from the ground up. And I thought I was safe. That was my mistake. The conversation happened on a Thursday, late afternoon. I had just wrapped up a call with one of our oldest clients, a multi-site logistics operation we had supported for over a decade. We had delivered another upgrade to their system ahead of schedule and under budget. I was still typing out the follow-up notes when the email landed in my inbox. Subject line, meeting 3:30 p.m. No context, just a room number. That room was never used for casual discussions. I knew what it meant before I stepped inside. He was already seated. No small talk, no acknowledgement of the years. Just a folder on the table. Ron, the company is moving in a different direction. You have done great work, but with current financial constraints and internal restructuring, your compensation package is no longer aligned with future budgeting goals. That was the sentence. The whole thing, not even a pause. I remember blinking once, then twice. I stayed quiet. You learn not to fill silences in those moments. Let them sit in their discomfort. He cleared his throat and added, "This is not performance-related. It is purely financial. You are at the top of the pay scale and we need more flexibility." 17 years, and that was it. I asked no questions. I stood up, extended my hand, and said, "Thank you for the opportunity." I shook his hand, took the folder, and walked out. He did not know I had already received 2 phone calls earlier that week, 2 different firms, both interested, both aware of our recent work. One of them, a former client who had moved to a new company. He had heard rumors that changes were coming and wanted to talk. I had not taken it seriously until now. I drove home in silence that day, no podcasts, just the low hum of tires on asphalt. I sat with the moment, let it breathe. When I got home, I poured a glass of water and stared out the window for a long time. I did not feel anger, I did not feel regret, I felt stillness, the kind that comes when something final happens. The next morning, I woke up early and wrote down every name, every contact, every lesson. Not out of spite, out of clarity. I did not want to forget who I had worked with or what we had done. I kept the records clean, professional. By Monday, I had 3 meetings scheduled. One of them with the firm that had been watching our growth closely for years. They had tried to recruit me before, quietly, over lunch or coffee. I had always said no out of loyalty. That loyalty had cost me. The irony was not lost on me. In those first few days, I started hearing from others, engineers, project managers, even a few senior consultants who had been wondering if something was coming. They were cautious at first, but after word got around that I was no longer with the company, the tone shifted. One of them called and said, "If you build something, let me know. I would rather work for you than explain budget cuts to confused clients again." I did not say anything right away, just listened. I was not planning to build anything, yet. I was still processing the last 17 years, the people, the mistakes, the successes, the politics. But I had already taken a few steps without realizing it. Quiet steps. A client had asked if I would be willing to consult independently, just for a few weeks. I said yes. That one yes turned into 2, then 4. By the end of the second week, I had 3 contracts in front of me, all from organizations that had worked with us in the past, all offering above my previous rate. Not because I was cheap, but because they trusted me to deliver. That was what the general manager never understood. He thought I was expensive because of a number on paper. He never realized I had saved the company far more than I cost, that I had spent years cleaning up bad estimates, managing client expectations, absorbing stress that others offloaded. But that was never documented in spreadsheets. You cannot quantify peace of mind. I had no intention of calling him. I had no intention of proving anything. But word travels. One of the clients I was now supporting used to be his biggest account. They called him the following Monday. They told him they would not be renewing. And when he asked why, they said, "Ron is handling it now." He did not respond. That same afternoon, I received a one-line email from him. It said, "Was this your plan?" I stared at it for a while. Then I deleted it because it never had to be a plan. All I had to do was keep showing up, do the work, keep the relationships clean. The rest took care of itself. The second Monday came with less noise but more clarity. The week prior, I had taken meetings in borrowed offices and home offices. This time, I walked into a real space. A clean, modest corner of a shared workspace that did not smell like desperation or ambition, just coffee and calm. I did not need anything fancy. I needed a door that closed, decent internet, and a desk where I could write clearly. By the time the sun was up, I had sent 3 proposals out. All simple, all direct, no fluff, no promises I could not keep. One of the firms replied within the hour, the other 2 by noon. I was not trying to prove anything to anyone. I was trying to work. I knew how quickly things could fall apart if you went too fast. I had seen it. At the firm where I spent 17 years, speed had become a disguise for poor decisions. We were not always the smartest team in the room, but we had been steady, and that steadiness had kept people loyal. Clients, staff, and suppliers. That loyalty had held the company up longer than anyone admitted. When that steadiness left, I left with it. Even if I had not walked out physically, I was already gone the moment they decided the numbers mattered more than the people. But I was not building a revenge business. I was building something I could sleep at night knowing I built right. One of my first hires was a project coordinator I had worked with over a decade ago. Sharp, reliable, underestimated more often than not. I called him on a Thursday. He picked up on the second ring. "Is this what I think it is?" he asked. I laughed. "You will know when you see the offer." I sent it 15 minutes later. No long interview. I already knew how he worked. He replied with a signed agreement before sunset. That night, I opened a spreadsheet. It was not glamorous, but it was mine. I wrote down every client name that had ever thanked us, every name I could remember who had called me when something went wrong. I built out a simple structure, 3 tiers of services: advisory, execution, and oversight. I did not need more than that. By Wednesday, 2 clients had already asked me to expand the scope of what I was offering. One of them asked, "Do you have a full team yet?" I told them I had who I needed for now. That was true. I did not want to grow for the sake of image. I wanted to grow because it made sense. There was a moment, sitting in that small workspace, replying to client emails with no overhead, no politics, when I realized how much weight I had been carrying before. Not the kind you feel in your hands, but the kind that lives between your shoulders. The kind that creeps in when every decision is second-guessed by people who do not understand the work. I had lived in rooms where people talked for 45 minutes before saying anything real. Now, I could make decisions in seconds. Not recklessly, but clearly. The third week after I left, I got another email. This one came from an engineer still at the old firm. We had worked on multiple systems together. He was calm, deliberate, not someone who panicked easily. The message was brief. 10 resignations this week. You might be seeing some familiar faces soon. I stared at the screen. I was not sure how to feel. It was not satisfaction. It was not regret either. It was something in between. Maybe just confirmation that I had not imagined everything I had seen. The pressure had been real. The slide had started long before I was shown the door. Later that day, the same engineer sent me a second message. By the way, the general manager's looking for a consultant to help stabilize their largest account. You are still on the list. I did not reply. That night, I took a walk. It was not to clear my head was clear. I just wanted to feel the air. I thought about how easily people were discarded when a spreadsheet said they were too expensive. As if experience was a liability. As if memory did not matter. What they had forgotten was that I remembered everything. I remembered the names of the contractors who showed up early and stayed late. I remembered the exact number of hours it took to salvage a failing logistics rollout 3 years ago. I remembered which clients smiled during handoffs and which ones asked the hard questions. And more importantly, they remembered me. I was not trying to win against the general manager. That was never the game. The real challenge was surviving the kind of system that treated loyalty as a weakness. The people I was now working with, former clients, former colleagues, they did not care about office hierarchy. They cared about delivery. They cared about trust. They wanted someone who would pick up the phone, not send them a link to a portal. That was the whole difference. By the end of that month, I had 6 clients on contract. Each one had found me, not the other way around. I had not advertised. I had not made announcements. The only thing I had done was answer when people called. I was still using the same desk, still showing up early, still reading the fine print. But I smiled more now. Not because things were easy, but because I knew who I was again. Not someone waiting for approval from the corner office, not someone holding his breath during budget reviews, not someone checking his email on Sundays because he was afraid something would collapse without his name attached to it. I was someone doing the work, without apology. The next Monday, I received a message from a partner at a national consulting firm. He had heard from one of his clients that I was back in circulation. He wanted to talk about a collaboration. I told him I had to think about it, and I meant it. I did not need a bigger name beside mine anymore. I had spent 17 years giving someone else's brand all the credibility I carried. Now, I was the brand. Not in some marketing slogan, just in the simplest way. If I put my name on something, I meant it. That same day, one of the clients forwarded me a proposal they had received from my old company. It was for the same project I had just completed for them 2 weeks prior. I read it. The pricing was higher, the scope was thinner, the language was vague. I asked the client what they planned to do. He replied, "Nothing. We are not going backwards." He did not say my name. He did not need to. By the time Friday came around, I was booked out for the next 3 months, and the best part was I had not chased a single one of those contracts. They came because the work came first, because respect does not expire the way salaries do, because people remember who helped when the pressure was on, not who smiled in the meetings. There is something strange about rebuilding your life at the very point you thought you would be coasting. But there is also something honest about it. This time, I knew exactly what I was building, and I would not trade that for a salary review or another framed certificate on the hallway wall. By the time the 3rd month rolled in, the rhythm had returned. Not the chaotic one I had grown used to, where inboxes overflowed by noon and half the decisions were made to appease whoever had the loudest opinion in the room. This was different. Measured, purposeful, earned. The workspace had changed too. What started as a small corner desk in a shared office had grown into a compact suite with enough room for 2 desks, a meeting table, and a quiet confidence that you could not buy with a title. I had hired 2 more people, 1 analyst, 1 client liaison. Both were people I had worked with before. Both had been overlooked at their previous companies, but I knew what they were capable of. I did not need perfection. I needed people who did not flinch when things got hard. People who understood that trust was not a bullet point in a strategy deck. It was earned over time in quiet ways. That was the difference between where I had come from and where I stood now. Over those 3 months, something happened I had not anticipated. Clients started asking not just for work, but for advice. They were not just asking me to manage projects or review strategies. They were calling on Saturdays to walk through critical decisions. They were forwarding internal documents, asking me what I saw that they might have missed. It was not about money anymore. It was about value, and that word had always been misunderstood in the boardrooms. Back at my old firm, value had been a number on a spreadsheet, a margin, a percentage, a slide at the end of a pitch deck. Here, value was a phone call returned on the same day, a risk flagged before it became a crisis, a budget saved without cutting corners. It was a name clients passed around quietly when someone asked, "Who can actually fix this?" They did not need my resume, they had the results, and I did not need a nameplate to feel relevant. My relevance was showing up in their bottom lines and their calendars. Then, one Friday afternoon, I got an invitation I did not expect. It came from a company I had never worked with directly but knew by reputation. Big, global, stubborn. They had heard about me through a supplier I had helped navigate a crisis. They wanted me to come in and take a look at one of their failing divisions. I said no. Not because the work was beneath me. It was not. I said no because I did not trust their reasons. They were chasing a fix, not a foundation. And I had promised myself I would not build anything temporary anymore. That same night, I got a different kind of message. It was from one of the junior staff members at my old firm, someone who had been in his first year when I was in my 17th. He wrote, "I thought you should know, they're restructuring again. The GM is stepping down. Something about missed forecasts and client loss. Some of us saw it coming. Others are just now figuring it out. They're trying to bring in outside help. Your name came up in the conversation. I told them you would not take the call." I read it twice, not because I doubted it, but because it felt like a closing chapter that wrote itself. I did not respond right away. Instead, I opened a document I had started weeks earlier. It was not a plan or a report, it was a list of every principle I wanted this company, my company, to be built on. Things I had learned the hard way, things I had ignored for too long because I thought loyalty meant silence. At the top of the list I had written, "People are not line items. They are the reason the work gets done." Simple, but true. That was the line I had built everything on since I walked out of that glass office with a thin envelope and a forced smile 2 inches from my face. The same GM who told me I was making too much money for what we need going forward was now stepping away from a company that no longer remembered who built its backbone. I never wished him harm. I did not need to. The consequences were never mine to deliver. What I had, now, was far more satisfying than any apology or reversal ever could be. I had built something better. From nothing. With no investors, no buzz, no favors. Just trust. Real relationships, quiet consistency. Clients stayed because they wanted to. Staff stayed because they were treated like professionals. I never made anyone prove their worth twice. And that next Monday, the one I had smiled about the day they let me go, it came quietly. No fireworks, no press releases, just a calendar reminder for a breakfast meeting with one of our newest clients, a company that had turned down my old firm just a week before. I arrived early, ordered a coffee, waited. The client sat down, looked around the cafe and said, "You know, you do not look like someone who is trying to compete with the big guys." I smiled. "I am not," I said. "I am just trying to do it right." That meeting turned into our largest contract to date, not because we underbid anyone, but because we told the truth. When I walked out of that meeting, I did not feel triumphant. I felt steady. That was enough. I had spent 17 years being told that security came from staying in line, from being dependable, predictable, quiet, but now I knew better. Security came from knowing you could rebuild, even after being discarded by people who never understood the cost of what you had given. Next Monday was fun. So was the one after that. But not because someone failed, not because karma came back around, because I got up, built something honest, and walked back into the world on my own terms. And that was worth more than every paycheck I had ever signed.